Hey everyone. So last month I did a Retrovember. It was a lot of fun. Talked about retro games. This month for December, to continue my experiment of trying a different theme each month, this month I'm going to have a fairly timely one, and the theme is going to be the best of 2024. This is going to be my own little, I wouldn't call it an award show, because that really oversells it, but it definitely is in the ballpark, so to speak. Anyway, so I've got 2 episodes this month that I have planned. I'm going to do one this week where I talk about kind of the best of the best. I've selected several random categories that I've selected to talk about a few games that came out this year. And then next week, I'm going to do my game of the year, and spoiler alert, it's going to be very controversial. Anyway, let's get into it. Hey, what am I playing? Alright, so a little bit of a warning here. As I'm recording this, am fighting a cold. So if my voice sounds more husky than usual, I apologize.
Let's get it done!
I have to be honest, I played a lot of great games in 2024. Coming up with my best of the best list of games to talk about was kind of hard. How do you narrow down the pantheon of incredible titles that came out in 2024 to a small few that represent the best of the best? The answer is you probably can't, at least not in any real comprehensive way. So what I've done is picked 4 games that I think represent some of the best that the game industry has to offer now. 4 games that either I've spent way too much time playing this year, or that were so special that I felt they deserved mention. I further refined this list of 4 into 2 main categories. So without further ado, let's talk about 2 of the best games to come out in 2024.
Have the enemy infiltrated the dome?
No, my lord.
What about the Temple of Thasian?
The dome was evacuated days ago.
Rejoin the main force immediately.
Our orders are to remain here.
On whose authority?
Captain Fairburn. We are to hold this position until further notice.
The dome is empty. Now move on.
But, sire...
I gave you an order.
Forgive me, my lord. Perhaps there was a communication error. The captain insisted.
The deserters.
No. We have our orders.
Vox your captain. If you are deserters, I'll execute you myself.
Captain Fairburn, come in. Captain Fairburn, come in.
Ambush! Kill them!
Space Marine 2 is the sequel to a beloved classic third-person shooter from 2011. In it, you play as a big, burly space marine in the grim, dark future, trying to protect humanity from alien and demonic threats. Here's the deal. Space Marine 2 has been a big success, so you probably are already familiar with it. It's a game with a tremendous amount of content, a pretty unrealistic amount of content for a AAA title in 2024. This is a AAA game, right? I mean, I know it's not EA or Ubisoft or another gigantic studio, but it is Saber Interactive and Focus Entertainment, and they do a lot of games that I personally would describe as AAA in scope. So surely it is, right? Whatever. Anyway, it had a gross amount of content on launch. A full campaign with cutscenes and big set pieces and voice actors talking gruff and grumbly and dripping with sweaty, hairy-knuckled machismo. The main campaign can be played solo or co-op with friends, and by itself, it's a good amount of content. But then there's this entire secondary campaign that's intended to be played cooperatively. This secondary campaign intertwines with the main campaign, filling out the plot points of what the other team is doing during the main campaign. In this secondary campaign, you have this whole class system with various support, DPS, and hybrid roles. These classes level up separately from each other and from the main campaign, and encourage the gamer to grind them for more in-game currency to level up and unlock gear, perks, and abilities. Then beyond this secondary campaign, there's this whole other PvP mode with smaller objective-based matches where two teams take on competing goals. I really do want to emphasize how unusual this amount of content is for a typical AAA game to have at launch. Most games these days release incomplete or with large segments of the game shaved off to be sold as DLC later on. They shipped filled with microtransaction, gatekeeping nonsense, and roadmaps telling the player what they can expect from the game as they continue to finish it. But here is Space Marine 2 with a full and complete experience at launch. It's amazing. Oh sure, they do have a roadmap of planned features and improvements, but what's shipped in the base game feels complete and robust. And I'm of the opinion that this should be celebrated. In a time where phrases like, the AAA video game bubble has burst, we should absolutely reward studios that ship an actually complete product that is a full single-player experience in addition to equally well-thought-out multiplayer modes. This is the gold standard all studios should strive for. So the game is good, it's fun, and I've put a ton of hours into it since release. I played the main campaign solo, and then later again with friends, and my friends and I have spent a ton of time in the secondary campaign, each leveling up their own class and decking them out with the prettiest things. Not everything is peachy here though. There's a real argument to be made that this game glorifies the fascistic, grim, dark future of the Warhammer 40k universe, that it's effectively propaganda, and celebrates militarism. These arguments are valid and true. This game does glorify the horrible themes in the Warhammer 40k lore. I mean, sure, Titus is a hero who saves the system this game takes place in from demonic invasion. Yes, that's all good. But you do realize that he'd happily murder countless civilians just to purge a few heretics hiding in their ranks, right? I mean, this dude is not really the good guy. None of these guys are the good guys. They prop up a semi-dead emperor who feeds on the power of humans, killing 1,000 every day just to keep his husk alive-ish. All this glorification of fascism in video game form might have seemed quaint and benign if we weren't on the verge of plunging into fascism ourselves.
Detonation in 5. Brace for shockwave. Throne. I felt that in my bones. No Xenos bioscans. Mission successful, Talassa. Return to the battle match.
Anyway, if you can go into it and treat it as pure escapism and not a grim portent of things to come, then man, this is a really great game. Just, recognize that this world isn't one we should be striving for, and shouldn't celebrate, and you'll do just fine.
Blight. Healing wounds.
I shall be.
There were so many great indie games in 2024, I had a hard time narrowing down the list to just one game. I know, I probably could have listed more, maybe make a whole video just on indie games, but I'm a busy guy, and I don't have the time to do that much. So I decided I needed to pick one, and only one, to represent what I consider a must-play indie game for 2024. And with that limitation in mind, there's one title that stands out from the rest. Animal Well is an indie Metroidvania developed by a single developer and is the first title published by Big Mode, the studio started by YouTuber Video Game Donkey. It has an incredibly unique retro art style, with a custom-built engine that produces some spectacular lighting effects. The game oozes style, and looks unlike pretty much anything else out there. From a gameplay perspective, this is a Metroidvania through and through. But there's really two aspects that set it apart from others in the genre. First, the player-controlled character cannot fight. You are intentionally weak, and never get more powerful. This changes up the strategy of the game, as you need to avoid combat or make use of environmental interactions to defeat enemies you cannot escape. Second, the game is organized into 4 mechanical layers of gameplay, each increasing the complexity of the game as you peel them back. The base layer is the game itself. You play through the game solving puzzles and collecting the 4 flames that are required for the main objective. Beyond that, the next layer consists of a mountain of optional content in the main game itself. Puzzles that hide secret items and hidden areas. The next layer is one which requires a community. Players are each given different snippets or clues to more obscure puzzles and challenges, and they must come together outside of the game to swap and compare notes to find the real solutions. The final layer involves a puzzle that requires multiple playthroughs and even speedrunning in order to unlock what's necessary to reach the final, true ending of the game. This game reminds me so much of Fez, which had similar hidden depths when it first came out over a decade ago. Animal Well is an incredible title, and deserves to be in your library. For my next category, I want to talk about the 2 best DLCs that came out in 2024 that I played. And if you know anything about me, you can probably already predict which 2 I'll be talking about.
Mongrel intruder. That tarnished, it seemeth. Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of light? Yet, my purpose standeth unchanged. Those stripped of the grace of gold shall all meet death. In the embrace of Mesmer's flame.
As a giant fan of Souls-likes and a big fan of From Software's work in general, obviously the Elden Ring DLC, Shadow of the Erdtree, was going to be big for me this year. I literally own Elden Ring for every platform. I have it on Steam, mainly so I can play it on my Steam Deck. I own it on PlayStation 5 and on the Xbox. If you combine my playtimes from all the platforms, I've put in over 500 hours in Elden Ring since the launch. Holy shit, I'm just editing the video now, and I noticed I have played 230 hours in Elden Ring on Steam alone. Which is hilarious, because I personally feel like it's the version I've played the least, since my PC games have been, 100% solo. And I've played several large co-op games with friends on the PlayStation 5. Anyway, when Shadow the Erdtree dropped, I knew it was going to eat up months of my time, and boy did it ever. In keeping with From Software's tradition of introducing DLCs to their Souls-likes that are harder than the base game, Shadow of the Erdtree is quite a bit tougher than the base game. If I'm honest, beating the base game has become kind of trivial between the power creep of endgame stats and how well I know each of the game's bosses. Other than a few bosses, I really don't find Elden Ring that challenging. But Shadow of the Erdtree turns the difficulty up to 11, tears out the knob, and then punches you in the face. Think your overleveled NG+++++ character will just stroll through the DLC like a killing machine? Think again. To overcome this difficulty, Shadow of the Erdtree introduces a new mechanic in the Shadow Fragments. Listen, I know they're spelled like Scadu Fragments, but that's not how they're pronounced. Clearly, Hidetaka Miyazaki was fascinated by the evolution of language when naming things in this game, because he spells jail like this. So it's no shock that he decided on the worst spelling for Shadow possible. The Shadow Fragments give you uniform stat boosts across the board and help offset the increased difficulty of the DLC. These fragments are found all over the land, encouraging exploration. And oh man, is it fun to explore this DLC. The map seems deceptively small at first blush, but the map hides the actual size of the DLC. In reality, the world of the DLC is vertical, with layers upon layers of locations stacked on top of one another and devious, often hidden paths joining them. Exploring the world is bewildering and confusing in the best way. But eventually, you start seeing method in the madness. And by the end of the game, it all makes sense, and navigating it is a breeze. My only complaint about the DLC is probably the final boss, which is easily the most bullshit and unfair boss From Software has ever produced. I have beaten it 5 times now, twice before they patched it to make it easier, and it just never feels fair. Every victory feels like it was pure luck. Like RNGesus smiled upon me and blocked some of his bullshit combos from firing back to back. I get that this is the culmination of the Elden Ring story, sort of, but give me a break. This boss is too unfair. But other than the final boss, Shadow of the Erdtree is From Software at their very best, and it's easily one of the best DLCs to come out in 2024. Longtime viewers probably already know this, but I am a huge Vampire Survivors fan. Hell, back in my original format of What Am I Playing videos, I think I mentioned Vampire Survivors nearly every week, simply because I'm always playing it. This is my go-to title for my late-night gaming sessions when I put on some metal in my headphones and get completely zooted. I'll fry my brain, listen to some Flesh God Apocalypse, Igor, Zeal and Ardor, or maybe some classic Tool, and assault my eyeballs with the bombastic Technicolor digital sex that is a good Vampire Survivors session. So bad is my addiction to Vampire Survivors that I own it for every platform it's available on. Steam, Xbox, PlayStation 5, Switch. Hell, I even have it on mobile and play it on my Anbernic RG Cube. And every time a new DLC comes out, I buy it again for each platform and systematically work my way through all the DLC on each system. Well, 2024 was a fucking great year to be a Vampire Survivors fan because we got 2 absolutely incredible DLCs. In the first half of the year, we got Operation Guns, which was their first collaboration with Konami, bringing in locations, characters, and enemies from the Contra series. This DLC also introduced a whole class of new weapons that require a special new item, the briefcase, to evolve. Now, I'm not a giant Contra fan. Oh sure, I enjoy the games, but it's not a beloved franchise for me. Even so, it was still a blast to unlock all the characters and vaguely recognize them from the Contra games I've played. But Operation Guns has nothing on the next DLC that came out in 2024 for the game. Ode to Castlevania launched on Halloween and brought with it the largest assortment of weapons of any DLC to date. Pulled from the rich history of the Castlevania franchise, there's some real deep cuts in here. I mean, one of the weapons is the frickin' wine glass that Dracula throws when talking to Richter in Symphony of the Night. It also introduced a healthy number of characters from the franchise, each with their own unique traits. But the real star of the show is the map. Oh my god, the map is glorious. It's massive and sprawling, filled with different bespoke locations from the series. It even changes up the formula a bit by introducing a side-scrolling section where you fight your doppelganger. But what makes the map really shine is how it deals with the power creep that comes from beating the rest of the game. See, when you first start Vampire Survivors, you are weak. Your selection of weapons are paltry, and your stats are low, and just trying to survive to the end of a single level is a daunting task. But once you unlock everything, you can become godlike. You get arcanas that drastically change the flow of the game, creating synergies and boons that otherwise wouldn't exist. You get power-ups that increase your speed, your damage, how quickly you level up, how many rerolls you get, how many revives you get, etc., and so on. And suddenly the game is easy, almost trivial. And you have to start limiting your power to give yourself a challenge. You'll do things like restrict the number of weapons you use, or turning off entire power-up lines, all to make the game harder again. This means that when a new DLC drops, if you've already unlocked everything in the base game and previous DLCs, you go into the new DLC way overpowered. And for some DLCs, I'm looking at you, Emergency Meeting, this makes them trivial. But Ode to Castlevania meets your power creep with gusto, and turns the formula on its head, providing a new, even more sinister challenge that actually makes it necessary for you to be overpowered. Seriously, Ode to Castlevania launched shortly after Vampire Survivors launched on the PlayStation. And I decided I was going to play that DLC first, before unlocking everything else, because I wanted to enjoy the DLC more instead of devouring it in one sitting, like I did with Emergency Meeting. And Ode to Castlevania completely and utterly kicked my ass. Anyway, I could probably talk about this game and this DLC for hours, but I really shouldn't. The longer I talk, the harder I make it on myself when editing. So I'll shut up now. Bottom line, Vampire Survivors is one of the best games out right now, and the 2 DLCs in 2024 are easily the best DLCs of 2024. Hell, as good as Shadow the Erdtree was, I honestly feel that Ode to Castlevania might be better. And the game and its DLCs are all stupid cheap. Seriously, it's the best bang for your buck in gaming right now. Go get it. If you already have it, go get it again.